All right, so I'm going to look around the room a little bit. See who's in here. I think everybody that speaks of the church ought to do that, by the way. I think sometimes you look out and you see people that have been in the church Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, right? Nobody knew nothing different than you saw 6 Sundays ago. I think for a speaker in a church, that ought to be a little different day than other people I don't know. There's new people in the room. So, I see a few people that are familiar that maybe I don't know. So, my view, I'm Patrick Fife. For those of you who don't know, my wife is Amanda. My boys are in the room today. My daughter-in-law that I love dearly. Got some other family in here that showed up, surprised me, made me more nervous to get up here and speak. But as a child, church wasn't a big part of our life, or maybe not even a part at all. But for me, like I always knew there was a God. Like I always felt it, I always feared his expectations. Like it made me nervous to think that maybe I wasn't doing something right. In some cases I did, and I worried about what he thought. I can remember many times as a kid just sitting up against a wall or a chair somewhere on my bed just thinking, like, is this for real? Like, is there somebody to talk to here? I think there is, but I don't want to look crazy in front of other people that might not feel the same way. So that's a child. As a father, as a new father, an adult, a husband, I made an offer to God on the drilling rig in Starkville, Mississippi, and he answered the next day. It was as real as the nose on your face, and for me, everything changed now. And some of you have heard that story, and that's not what I'm here to tell today, but it hadn't been perfect since then. But there has been a true relationship that's been developed. Now, as an adult, coming into your faith like that, maybe there's people in the room that come to their faith as an adult, there's real hang-ups in a Baptist church, right? Because you've got a logical mind. It doesn't make sense to you that things are mysteries and that it shouldn't be able to be explained. So for me, the main dilemma I had that I heard was that there is a God. He is all-powerful. And there is terrible evil persisting on this earth. To me, that didn't make any sense. And I rejected the notion that it had to be a mystery to me. I've heard people say a lot, well, you just don't understand what God's doing right there. And I'm like, God's not doing that. If it's the God you're talking about that I think I know from this Bible, you're wrong. He's not doing that. Maybe that gives you peace to believe that God is doing that. But for me, it doesn't give me peace. So, y'all asked me to speak, so I'm speaking. So, for that particular hang-up, which was a significant one for me, I knew there was a God. I knew he was all-powerful, but I knew there was evil in this world that he didn't have anything to do with. It was a real hang-up for me. The first day that started, and that evil, let me say this for perspective. Some people know that there's evil on earth. You shake your head and people say there's evil, and you go, yeah, I believe you. Some people have been affected by that evil. Right? So they're a little closer to it than maybe the person that just knows and believes it's there. And then there are people that are suffering that evil. And that's a whole different conversation with those people, in my view, right? There is God. He is all-powerful. But there's terrible evil. So how do you reconcile that? I needed reconciliation on that. For me, that reconciliation started with a conversation with Floyd Stanley. I know maybe there's people in here that know Floyd, maybe they don't. But we were in Miss Thurman's Sunday school class, and we were talking about salvation and repentance and sin. And for me, I'm new, and it's like, I just want to get something straight so we can really live this awesome life, right? We can do all the things right. And there's a path, and we can have belief, and we can have faith, and there's a path in that for us that takes us to heaven. And the class in unison was like, yeah, okay. And I said, or you can be this terrible human who's done all these terrible things in the world, and then you can wake up one morning and decide you're a new person and leave all of that behind and get the same reward or same ending that this person did who's done all these great things. And there was a resounding, yeah. Okay, explain that to me. Don't make any sense to me at all. And I didn't get an explanation. Okay? So, what I would tell you, Christians, if you're going to claim something, be able to explain it. Because intelligent people might want to have an answer. But we came out the building, it was the old Sunday school building then, and Jim was here. We came around the back of the church. Boy Stanley runs up behind me and grabbed my arm. He said, hey. He says, how about me and you just hang out in the parking lot today? So we did. And I stood out there with him, and he told me a story about Father's love. And he used analogies which resonated with me. And I started to get it that day. It's not that I was struggling with faith, mind you. I was struggling how to make sense of it. I'm someone who, if I believe something, I need to be able to explain it. Okay? Maybe that's not important for people, and I certainly don't think that's the ticket to heaven. But if you're someone who's going to talk about what you believe, you ought to be able to explain it. So after that conversation with Floyd, my mind starts wandering around, and it says, okay, our Father intended to have a creation right here. And how, in His greatest of wisdom, would He do it? Right? So there was not this situation, and then there was this situation. What for? Why? So for me, and I'm going back, I'm trying to solve this dilemma that I have. There is a God, He is all powerful, but there's some terrible evil in this world. So how do I reconcile that? So for me, it said, well, God had three choices when He did it. Right? He could create a world that knew no good or evil. He could do that. Well within His power. And essentially, it's a world full of animals. Right? Instincts drive the bus. And there's nothing good or bad about an animal's instincts. And so He could have done that. Because He was going to create it for whatever reason. There will be a place for souls, spirits to come down from heaven, live out a life, be done, and go away. So He could have done that. He could have created a world of complete predetermination. In other words, before He ever created anything, He'll sit down and write a book about how all that's going to work out. Every little inch of it. And then He'll just set it in motion. And for me, that's a world of robots. What's the point? If I don't have choices, if everything's been written, then I'll just sit at home and do what I like. Because before I ever hit the ground here, I've decided where I was going to be. So, to me, that doesn't make sense either. The third option could be you could create a world in which love could breathe the supreme name. And in that world, you choose God's will or your own will. In that world, you suffer the choices of others. In that world, you can love. You can actually love something. And what is love? Love's not a desire. Love's not an instinct. Love is an action that happens even outside of your instincts and desires. Love gives all it has and only feels bad that it doesn't have anything else to give. That's love. How do you create a world where we have the ability to choose love? Well, you got to create the whole spectrum. You got to put a place here where I can come and I can land on this world and I can be the most terrible thing it's ever seen. Or I can choose love and follow a God who tells us clearly the way He wants us to act. And I can choose that difference. But for me, I have to be pulled equally one way, in both ways, and I have to make a choice to reconcile what I hear and what I read in our Bible. So, all that being said, I gave y'all like the Cliff Notes version of what goes through my head. I did a lot of traveling over the last week, and I said, well, I'm going to decide what I'm going to talk about in church. So, what will I talk about? Let's see. I can talk about the relationship with God. Right? I feel like I can explain that pretty well, and how I know it's real, and how I maintain it, what it feels like when it doesn't get maintained. I can talk about a testimony of a miracle witness. I've seen those, many of them. I could talk about a Bible story. Right? Just pick one out and get after it and draw some analogies. But I made myself a note right here. I said, well, just look around the room when you get there and decide it. So, why is it so hard to decide? Well, because there are things that hang me up. And, I mean, I've heard Bible verses getting taken out of context. Right? I've heard a whole sermon around a Bible verse and then go back home and get, a chapter out in front of it, a chapter out behind it, and be like, well, that's what that was. I mean, it was a good message, and I didn't hear anybody tell anybody to do anything they shouldn't do. I was like, that ain't what it meant. I see, a lot of times I see New Testament outreach for salvation up on stage, but then back in cliques, I see Old Testament judgment and separation. I don't want to do that. So I know I'm talking a lot about things that bother me. Let me tell you something else about it. Bad cell phone signal. Who likes bad cell phone signal? And when you don't have good signal, like, what does it lead you to do? Right? I ain't making no calls. I ain't taking no calls. And if I drive into a bad cell phone signal area while I'm talking, I will hang up on you. I will not stay on the phone with it popping and staticky. I'll just hang up. It's best for me. It's best for you. Trust me. Because I'm going to get the wrong idea about it. So, and then depending on who you are, and what you know about the subject, it's very important to have a lot of good signal while you're having certain conversations. So, I feel the same way about this Bible. Like, I look through it and I go, I ain't got no signal right there. I can read it and it's words. I don't have any signal right there. Full bars. Full signal. When the words get read, and I mean R-E-D, when the words get read in my Bible, I don't need any interpretation. Pretty simple, right? So for me, as I look through this Bible, I'm going to have good signal. Now I can tune in, I can pick the phone up, I can read a little bit, but if it gets poppy, I move on. Right? Find another page. It's not like that when I get here. So what am I going to talk about today? Well, I don't want to lie to you. I don't want to interpret things or take it out of context. So what better place to get than Matthew 5, 6, and 7? There's one black sentence at the first of Matthew 5, and there's one black sentence at the end of Matthew 7. So it's full bars all through here. Okay? Who knows what I'm talking about? It's the Sermon on the Mount. Right? So I'm going to run through here quick. The lot of good stuff in here. You can go back and read it all you want. Jesus saw the crowds, got up on the mountain, sat down, started talking. In 13 through 16, he talks about the salt of the earth in chapter 5. He talks about the light of the world. 17 through 20, he talks about righteousness that must surpass the scribes and the Pharisees. That ought to hit home. For me, as I read that, righteousness that surpasses the scribes and the Pharisees, I thought about, I got to get past some of the issues I have and figure out what I look like, right? I got to quit going, well, I ain't going to do that because he said this or she said that or something out of context. I'm called to be better than that. 21 through 26 in chapter 5 talks about anger. It talks about if you're making a sacrifice to God, or if you're giving something at the altar, but you know that you got a problem with somebody, then there's no need to go. Or if you made it there, just leave it there and go rectify that situation. Because I won't say God will hear, but this is pretty clear. There's no need. If you got business that needs to be settled with other people, if somebody's holding accusations against you. In 27 and 30, that's a tough one today. 27 through 30, and I'm just made loose notes here, like that's adultery and lust. Men, don't do it. Don't even think about doing it. Good luck with that. Women, don't tempt men. Good luck with that. It's tough. Unachievable, right? And then it says, he goes on to say, tear your eyes out, cut your hands off. It'd be better for part of your body to get to heaven than it would be to risk all of it going to hell. I'm not interpreting that. I'm just reading it. 31 and 32 talks about divorce. Plain English. No interpretation needed. Plain English. I really like chapter 5, 33 and 37, taking oaths. Basically, the gist of those say, let your yes be yes. Let your no be no. If you out there promising and swearing on things, is it because you had a problem with yes being yes and no being no? Right? Jesus said, if you're doing that, that's coming from someplace evil. Right? You got to make promises like that. Yes ought to be yes, no ought to be no. 38 through 42 talks about retaliation. You know, you hear a lot of eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. I think most people in here would agree that's not the context that Jesus gives in the Sermon on the Mount. He takes it all the other way. Turn the other cheek. Right? Give them your tunic. Take out your other garment. They want you to go a mile, go 2. Give to those that ask of you to give. Lend to those who seek to borrow. Pretty simple. Love your enemy. This one was fun to read. Have y'all ever noticed when you read something with the purpose of going somewhere and talking about it, it changes the way you read it? I know Corey knows what I'm talking about. It's a big deal to look at and go, okay, well, I'm going to talk about this. Well, for this, the thing that came out of this with me was Jesus saying, even the worst on the earth love the people that love them back. The thieves, the murderers, the rapists, like they team up and they love on each other. And we do too, by the way. We team up on each other, we love each other, that's not bad. But he's telling us to love our enemies, to let that stuff go, to forgive. And it's pretty clear in reading this is that if there are barriers between you and the blessings you want from God, in some instances, maybe it ain't what's good for you, what you want. But in other instances, read this sermon. And hear all this read that says, you got to get this out of the way, you got to get this out of the way. Jesus told people all the time, like, well, yeah, you can do it, but you're not doing it right. Now, starting off chapter 6, 1 through 4, 5 through 9, then we get the Lord's Prayer, and 9 through 14, and then we go 14, 16 through 18. There's a recurring theme that happens through here. In charitable giving, in praying, and in fasting. And the one thing that Jesus keeps saying over and over, if you're giving so that somebody can see, you better make sure you get your reward. Because that's the only reward you're going to get for it. Right? If you're praying so somebody can see, you better make sure you get your reward. If you're fasting so someone can see, you better make sure you get your reward. Like, that's not on. He wants those things to happen in a quiet and hidden place so that the Father sees it and that the Father knows. He talks about don't babble. Don't make a spectacle of it. Just do your stuff and move on. And as I read through that, I made some notes here, and I talked about if the righteous, according to the word of Jesus, if there's someone who's righteous according to the word of Jesus, then you have no idea what they're doing. You have no idea what's happening. And if you're someone who thinks you're separating yourself from people because you don't see that righteousness in certain circles, what does that make you if that's the only association you take? After you go back and you read chapter 6, verses 1 through 18. Think about that. 19 through 24. Treasures. Don't store them up on earth. Wherever you treasure, that's where your heart's going to be. Can't serve two masters. Love one, hate one, despise one, devoted to the other. It's all pretty clear. Chapter 6, 25 through 34. Worry and anxiety. As we go back and look at all the fasting, praying, giving, aren't we taught, or I'm taught in those verses, we got a long way to go. What are we worried about? Are we focusing our efforts on the things that we can actually control? Are we doing it correctly? Are we harboring unforgiveness? Do we have unsettled business with our brothers and sisters that we aren't taking care of? Is that what's happening? And I settled myself on, you know what, bad things are going to happen. Because let's go back to what I was talking about earlier. In this world where God creates a situation where love becomes the supreme moral ethic, and you get to choose, bad things are going to happen. Because you're not subject to your choices alone. You're subject to other people's choices. Right? So bad things are going to happen. Try not to be reasoned. Well within your control. Focus your energy and your efforts and your thoughts on the things that you can control. Consider the philosophies of the people you deal with. I won't take you all the way down the road, but people think, big thinkers are the way to go, right? I need a rationalist in my life, rationalism. Well, they think so much that sometimes they don't get anything done. I'm guilty of that when it comes to projects in our house. Imperialism, they only consider data. Like if the data don't tell them, they're out. They're not going to do it. Intuitionalism says, I believe what experiences I've had, and that's what charges my gut, and that's the way I go. There's limits to all of that. There's limits to all of it. You know just about right away whether you can control something or not when you come across it, or whether you can impact it. Act on that. Judging others, judge and be judged. The speck and the beam. I know I'm not saying anything that people aren't loving, but like, you think back over your church life and what it takes about 16 minutes to read in its fullness comes to about, 1,000 different sermons that people have given. But it's just so easy just to run through it. Consider other people's perspectives. The skeptical and the cynical. This goes back to what I was saying earlier. If you want to talk about what you want to believe, you better be able to explain it to the unbeliever. Right? And I say this by throwing, it talks in verse 6 of chapter 7 about holy to the dogs, like giving what's holy to the dogs and throwing pearls before swines. Like you've got to discern between, are you dealing with a skeptic or are you dealing with a cynic? Right? The cynic is the swine. The cynic is the dog that just wants you to say something. And when they hit you, they've prepared. So are you ready? But the skeptical just wants to learn more. So you really need to be ready. Verses 7 through 12, ask, seek, and knock. It talks about the gifts you give to your own children and relating that to the gifts that your Father will give you. 13 through 14, the narrow gate. Few are who find it. 15 through 20 in chapter 7 talks about discernment for us, our discernment. Right? 2 people wake up every morning worried about the sheep, wondering what they're doing, caring about where they're going. The shepherd and the wolf. Both want to know where the sheep's at. And then think about it too. If you're not the sheep, right? If you're leading someone, like I'm standing up here right now, am I a shepherd or a wolf? It's for you to decide. And you ought to be smart enough to decide if you know what you believe. And then discernment by Jesus. This one's easy. You've done it. He knows it. What wipes the slate clean? What washes away that filth? It matters what you know. And then we get to 24, 27, the foundations on the rock and on the sand. And this talks about, the one thing that stood out to me here is that it was grounded in knowledge. Before you build this house on the rock or the sand, as I read this, you knew you should have built it on the rock, and you didn't. It's very important what you know. Right? With knowledge comes accountability and responsibility to act on it. So if you haven't been told, if you haven't been witnessed to, then you've got a different accountability than someone who knew better and didn't. And then 28 and 29, these people heard him, they were amazed, and the difference was that he spoke from authority instead of the place of just knowledge and subjectivity, the way that the Pharisees and the prophets had spoken. So, a lot to learn in the Sermon on the Mount. A lot indeed. We'll do it really fast. So, I thank y'all for listening to me. And I'm going to pray for you. And then we'll get Jamie Lynn, I guess, or somebody come up. Miss Debbie, you want to come play some music for us? We'll come on up here. So, I'm going to pray. And like I say, I look around the room and I think, man, if you got something you want to talk about, I'll talk to you about it. There ain't no doubt about it. I know this man sitting right over the front will talk to you about it. Jamie will. Ain't a man in this room right now today will talk to you about something. I promise. So, I'm going to pray. We'll let Miss Debbie play for a minute. And if somebody else needs to pray, they'll come up and do that. And then after that, we'll dismiss. Okay. Father God, I love you. I thank you for the opportunity to get up here. God, I'm just humble as I read the Word, God. People want to know. People think they're doing all right, and then they realize how bad they are when they start trying to talk about being good. So, Father, I just pray that rain on us that's needed here today, those that love you, so they will follow you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.